Welcome back to Good Sports For You, where we are talking about good sports for you, and I am back today with another look at my grandfather's scrapbook from 1953, talking about the Milwaukee Braves. Last time we talked about Eddie Matthews and Johnny Antonelli. Now, we don't have players of those caliber because obviously Eddie Matthews is one of the best players ever, but it's so cool to look at these articles from the past, and I wanted to share that with everyone. But before we hop into it, I want to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate it so much. So for those of you who don't know, this season in the 1953 season was the Braves' first season in Milwaukee. So the newspapers were basically talking about all the players to expect as Milwaukee was finally getting a major league team for the first time in forever. So the first player I want to read about is Andy Pafko. Andy Pafko, a favorite of fans in the area for years while he played center field for the Chicago Cubs, will return to his home territory this season as a member of the Milwaukee Braves. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, the Cubs are the Brewers' rival. They're Milwaukee's rival. That was not the case at this time because Milwaukee didn't have a major league team. So a lot of people in the area were Cubs fans because, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, it's same geographical area. But obviously now, to think that a Braves player like an Anthony Rizzo or Chris Bryant in their prime would have been fan favorites in the Milwaukee area is absolutely absurd. But anyway, a native of Boyceville, Wisconsin, Pafko, 31, was purchased 2 months ago from the Brooklyn Dodgers, for whom he turned in several outstanding fielding plays against the New York Yankees in the World Series last fall. Pafko and Joe Adcock, another recent acquisition, will add right-handed hitting strength the Braves needed so badly a year ago. 6 feet and 190 pounds, Pafko got his start in organized baseball with two Wisconsin clubs, Eau Claire in 1940 and Green Bay in 1941. He was also on the Brewers roster at one time, but never played for Milwaukee. Again, this is the minor league Milwaukee Brewers. Pafko was with the Cubs from 1943 to 1951. While an outfielder primarily, he did perform at third base for Chicago 2 seasons. He hit .287 last year for the Dodgers, driving in 85 runs and hitting 19 home runs. His major league batting average is .290. He has hit 163 home runs. Again, one thing that's really interesting about these articles from the 50s is the things that they highlight. It's talking about batting average, RBIs, and home runs, and that's basically it. They're not going to talk about on-base percentage. He draws a lot of walks. They may talk about how much a guy strikes out, but they're not really going to talk about, he has a low average, but he walks so much, so his on-base percentage is great. They're going to talk about batting average. They love to talk about batting average. They're going to talk about RBIs. They love to talk about how many guys you're able to drive in, and they're going to talk about home runs, which, to their credit, is something that we still focus on so much today. But if we look at the stats for Andy Pafko, as you can see, he was very good with the Cubs. He was one of the best Cubs players of that generation. In fact, if you look at his Wikipedia page, he was named to the All-Century team for the Chicago Cubs for the 20th century. But then as you go down, you're looking at his time then with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he was pretty solid for a season and a half there. But then once he got to the Milwaukee Braves, he definitely began to peter out. He wasn't able to put up the production that he used to. He had a couple of good seasons in there at the beginning, but then after that, he dropped down to a below average bat. Still maintained a pretty relatively high average, except for those final 2 seasons at the end of his career. But that's a 37 and 38 season, so you can't really expect much from that. He was on the Hall of Fame ballot. He wasn't able to get in, but to even be on the Hall of Fame ballot is a huge success, even back then when the rules were a little softer. But he was a huge fan favorite in Milwaukee. In fact, the Milwaukee Lutherans, like the religion, had basically a day for him specifically. They had an Andy Pafko night, and they gave him a new car. So take a look at his Wikipedia page. That's kind of fun. But next up, we're going to have Joe Adcock, our next player, who turned into a very good player for the Braves, unlike Andy Pafko. Joe Adcock, the Braves' new first baseman, is a holler guy. Love it, first of all. Noted for his aggressiveness, Adcock seldom walks on the field, usually running to and from his position. Joseph Wilbur Adcock, 6 feet 4 inches and 210 pounds, came to the Braves in February from the Cincinnati Reds as part of a 4-team trade. A native of Cashcotal, Louisiana, Adcock, 25, attended Louisiana State University, where he was known as Joe Bill. He starred in basketball as well as baseball at LSU. Originally a first baseman, Adcock had shifted to the outfield with the Reds in 1950 after advancing to Cincinnati from Tulsa of the Texas League. Adcock hit .278 in 117 games at Cincinnati last season, belting 13 home runs and driving in 52. Again, the focus is on those three stats: batting average, home runs, and RBIs. Playing the outfield, however, did not agree with him, and he was glad to return to first base. He handled 120 chances faultlessly at first base for the Reds last year in 17 games. His outfield average was .985 in 85 contests. This is something that I also think is really interesting, is they talk about the fielding averages and your fielding percentage. That is something that people never talk about nowadays in modern baseball, because we recognize that kind of errors are a weird stat, because if you're able to get to the ball but then you drop the ball, it's counted against you as an error. But if you're not even able to get the ball at all and you don't drop it, it just drops by itself, that's not counted as an error. But shouldn't the guy who was able to get there be considered the better defender because he was at least able to get there? So that is just something that's interesting, is that they do focus on like how much errors mattered in the game, when nowadays I can't remember the last time I heard somebody talk about like a player's fielding percentage, quite frankly, because I think a lot of people know that it doesn't really matter. But for the Milwaukee Braves, Joe Adcock had a very successful career. I mean, he put up 26.6 WAR for the Milwaukee Braves, and this is something else too. You will never hear WAR. I mean, it wasn't even a stat back then, right? But as you can see, I mean, his second season in 1953, he hit .308, hit for good slugging. He always had a decent amount of home runs, some 20 seasons in there. But then in 1956, he had a great season, hitting 38 home runs with over 100 RBIs, finishing 11th in MVP voting. So just a really solid player for the Braves, and I like how they were talking about it here, about, hey, he's going to be one of the guys for this team, and he absolutely was one of the better players for this squad. So they basically hit it on the money for him. The next guy we're going to talk about is going to be Walker Cooper. This is going to be the final player we talk about. They did not hit the nail on the head with this one, I'll say that. Cooper, the oldest man on the Braves roster, Big Walker Cooper, 38, is nonetheless one of the most feared batters in the National League. Although slowed down since his days as the league's top catcher, 6 All-Star games, Cooper still possesses a strong arm and remains one of the league's most feared batters. In 1942, 43, and 44, he and his pitching brother, Mort Cooper, led the St. Louis Cardinals to consecutive pennants. In 1946, Walker was sold to the New York Giants for $175,000. He enjoyed his biggest season after coming out of the Navy in 1947, hitting 35 home runs and driving in 122 runs. That's a really impressive season. Anyway, Cooper came to the Braves in 1950 from Cincinnati after 1 year with the Reds in a trade for second baseman Connie Ryan. Last year, despite a .235 batting average in 102 games, Cooper drove in 55 runs and hit 10 home runs. In 1947, he hit 7 home runs in 6 successive games to tie a major league record. Cooper has hit 141 home runs since arriving in the majors in 1940. He is 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighs 220 pounds. He lives in Atherton, Missouri. Again, it's funny that they say, hey, they even live in this area. And one thing that I forgot to mention about Joe Adcock is I think that it's interesting that frequently they will bring up where they played in the minor leagues. I don't think that tends to happen as much anymore. Like multiple years down the line, I don't think they'll be saying, oh yeah, the Brewers called up Jacob Mizorowski from Nashville 7 years into his career. I just don't think you're going to see that a lot. But Walker Cooper was bad with the Braves. I mean, in his sole season in 1953, he put up negative WAR. He hit for a .219 average. I mean, as a catcher, it's whatever. He didn't have any pop in the bat whatsoever. He had 3 home runs. He had 16 RBIs in 53 games. He just performed really, really poorly. I mean, this was at the tail end of his career as well, and he ended up playing until he was 42, going back to the St. Louis Cardinals, which is just absolutely incredible. He was an 8-time All-Star, though, and I will say he was somebody that it felt really benefited from the fact that he hit for a high average as a catcher. If you look at his prime seasons with the Cardinals, he hit .318 and .317 in back-to-back seasons. As a catcher, at that time, when all you're really caring about is average, that's going to translate well into All-Star votes and also MVP votes. He finished second in the MVP race in 1943, kind of undeservingly so. He got first place vote somehow when Stan Musial was on his team and was better in literally every single category. He had literally 3 times the WAR. He had way more hits. He hit for 357 batting average, 425 on base percentage, a 563 slugging for almost a 1 OPS. Compared to Walker Cooper, who's literally just worse in every single aspect. But hey, man, he got votes. But Walker Cooper, excellent career, and they were really doing their best to hype him up to all the Milwaukee fans. But he just simply didn't perform in his sole season for the Milwaukee Braves. And then he went on to play for the Pirates for a bit, then the Cubs, and then went back to St. Louis to wrap up his career. But, I got so much more to talk about with this whole entire book. There are so many cool things. But what I've decided is it's going to be a once-a-week series as I'm going to go back to this. It's probably going to be every Monday unless there is some really big news that happens in the MLB. But I want to keep going over all this because there's really, really cool stuff that I want to talk about. But that is all I got for you right now. Make sure to check out the videos coming up. I'm going to have a tier list coming at you on Friday that I can't wait to share with everyone. And then as always, I'll be keeping you up to date on MLB news and all the exciting things that are happening in and around baseball. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate it so much. And I'm out. Peace.